If you are struggling through a relationship or a breakup with a dismissive avoidant, you are probably also struggling to feel seen. We all want to be seen and understood by the person we care about. We should never be made to feel like we must compete to be a priority over someone else. But what if the person that you're competing against doesn't realize they're participating in any competition because they're not a part of the relationship? Not really. They are merely a phantom of your avoidance past. Hello, friends. My name is Maria, and I know what it feels like to be thrown over for another woman. I also know what it feels like to be thrown over for another woman who's no longer in the picture. A phantom ex is an avoidance perfect excuse to create distance in a relationship right at the point where it would naturally develop into something deeper. You don't deserve to be constantly, relentlessly, directly compared to another person. This is a problem. We get into these avoidant, anxious relationships where we have to fight to feel seen. We have to fight to exist. But how can we ever feel like we truly exist in a relationship when someone else looks at us and all they can do is compare us to or think about someone else? I personally learned a hard lesson about phantoms and huge red flags when it comes to getting involved with unhealed avoidant attachers, and I would like to share that lesson with you today. So if you're like me and you are tired of battling the ghosts of your lover's past, then grab a bottle of nail polish and let's talk. Human beings naturally make comparisons. Whenever we begin to date a new person, we compare them to people we've previously dated. And oh yes, when people begin to date us, they compare us to their exes as well. I have a viewer who wanted to discuss avoidance, who make quiet comparisons between the real relationship they have with you and the relationship that is actively over. It's a relationship that's only kept alive in your avoidance mind. What can potentially happen when your avoidant has an ex who is still a significant part of their life, whether real or imagined? And why do they mercilessly compare you to this person, whether you like it or not? Here's the thing. I do believe making comparisons is healthy. It's a good way to analyze past patterns and help protect yourself from continuing to make the same relationship mistakes. I personally found way more success in dating after I decided to sit down, paint my nails, and begin making comparisons and identifying patterns in my past relationships. Like comparing the behavioral patterns of people I knew genuinely cared about me to the behavior of people who, in hindsight, were only using me as a placeholder while they continued to search for their ideal love, whether real or some fictitious greener grasses phantom fantasy. Comparisons can be a powerful tool that you can use to your benefit. However, when it comes to avoidance making comparisons, I argue that if your avoidant evaluates your relationship and decides that between you and some intangible phantom ex fantasy, they would rather have the fantasy, even if the decision was made out of fear, let them have their fake fantasy and leave them alone. You will never measure up to imaginary perfection, and they will never find it. Perfection does not exist. Allow them the dignity of their mistake. I believe avoidants go after impossible relationships with impossible people because there's a safety in knowing that it will never come to fruition. They enjoy long distance. They enjoy following fake people on social media or adult websites. And a phantom ex, well, that's just as fake as anything else. I have a viewer who believes the phantom ex is nothing more than one more excuse in your avoidance detachment arsenal. Barbara 6840 says, I don't believe avoidance, aka toxic people, have a phantom ex. I believe they will come up with any excuse to avoid holding themselves accountable for simply knowing they cannot be a good partner to you. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you. I mean, you guys saw the thumbnail. Hustler, 4RS, responded, the phantom ex could be an imaginary partner with the qualities they wish their real partner had. It's just a deactivation strategy. Heathcliff 8940 says, I was the phantom ex for sure. The way she pursued the hell out of me until I caved. But when we got back together, her phantom ex became an amalgamation of characters from dark romance books she read. And for some weird reason, her other friends' phantom exes when they would tell her about them. Anything to avoid, I guess. Yeah, well, if anything, having an imaginary fantasy partner would be a great way for anyone to mentally escape a real relationship and remain emotionally unavailable. Black Wolf GK8SN says, I was the rebound. Now I'm the phantom she's never going to replace. Monkey Mind 360 says, I was the rebound, and now I think I will be the phantom ex. She told me I was irreplaceable. It's gross when people say things like that to you just to dip out. It probably wasn't a lie, but why say it in the first place? Just so it'll hurt more? Monkey Mind, take a cue from Black Wolf. They know just because other people behave badly and hurt us, it doesn't mean that we're replaceable. You are real, and while fantasies can be fun, they're a cheap dopamine escape. Real is better. And if you struggle with people who continue to breadcrumb you and come in and out of your life and jerk you around, I do have a member video coming out this weekend where I help a gentleman, James, get some clarity on a woman who's been jerking him around. I'll go ahead and put the link to the membership videos down below. And last but certainly not least, Frank says, I'm probably the rebound, Maria, but it doesn't matter as Baggio and I are inseparable now. Baggio's his doggy. Frank is a good inspiration for any of you who are in a lot of pain today. Frank was discarded and depressed, but now he's doing great, and he even has this brand new adorable YouTube channel called Frank and Baggio the Cavalier. So if you'd like to switch over to something a bit more lighthearted today, you should go ahead and check it out. It's a lot of fun. It's awesome when you see longtime viewers of the channel having fun again. Their stories are incredible, and if you never got to tell your side of the story in a traumatic breakup and you have a message that you would like viewers on this channel to hear, then I'll go ahead and put the Gmail to this channel down below, and I'll feature your story in a video, and I will personally make sure that you receive a copy of the video. And I want you to know that once you get past this, because you will have a far greater capacity to enjoy life even more than your avoidant ex, because you appreciate relationships where they might not be perfect, but they are real. Avoidance can't handle relationships being real. And you know how I know that? 2 words: phantom ex. Whether you are the person or it's someone else, it doesn't matter. Even if they are idealizing a person who existed, they are still not actively involved in a relationship with them. There is another aspect to the phantom excuses that helps avoidance avoid taking accountability for things like coming into your life, stirring up all of your romantic energy, telling you that you're the best relationship they've ever had, you are irreplaceable, and then leaving. Their attachment wound is working in overdrive to find any comparison between you and their phantom ex who hurt them. Some argue that because the avoidance phantom ex is the one who got away, they are idealized in the avoidance mind, and no one will ever be able to measure up. I do have some experience with this, and I'd like to tell you a quick lesson that I learned the hard way about phantom exes and rebound relationships, and how later on this experience allowed me to make a healthy comparison that helped me avoid a potential dating disaster. My DAX is a little older than me, and he was someone that I knew a bit for a while before we started dating. 20 years earlier, when he was only 20 years old, he married a narcissistic woman who I will call Natalie. Natalie the narcissist, if you will. After only 6 months of marriage, Natalie cheated on him, abandoned him, divorced him, and left him for one of his closest friends. Natalie the narcissist was his first ever romantic relationship. This is brutal, and I'm not even up here trying to dispute that. But wait, how do I know his phantom ex, Natalie, was a narcissist? Well, I don't. I can't diagnose her. But I did go on her social media page because he talked about her so much. Red flag. Especially after he'd had a couple of drinks. Red flag, red flag. And when I logged on to her social media page, I saw what these days I would identify as a huge red flag if Natalie was someone that I was considering getting involved in a relationship with. Her social media feed was only selfies. No photos of friends, family, not even her kid. And at this point, she was divorced and single again. Her posts were only pictures of her face, and she would talk about how she was the victim of every circumstance, of every person that she came across in life, even though I have a sneaking suspicion she also had a hand in why both of her marriages failed. Now you would think, because of the way Natalie brutally abandoned my DAX, and because of the way he always talked about her like she was a real piece of work, he would never want to see her again. But quite the contrary. Because on our third date, my DAX brought me to a beautiful restaurant where Natalie's band just so happened to be playing that night. Here's the twisted part. I knew how much Natalie had hurt him. And because I cared about him as a friend, not only as a friend, but as someone who was really starting to become enamored with him as a potential boyfriend, I thought, this is great. She was awful to him. He could use a win. Let's rub it in her face how much better he's doing these days and how far he's come, how much he's moved on. Moved on. I was so naive. Look where he was that night, literally standing front and center, watching her up on a stage, all the spotlight on her. Being abandoned and discarded traumatizes people. He was never emotionally able to move on. And of course, a few months later, after confessing his love for me, he ran for the hills, using the excuse that he had been so hurt 20 years earlier, he could never be in a relationship, after being the person who pursued me for a relationship. Ain't that a bitch? But another big lesson that I have learned is someone disclosing personal information to you, it's not always the same as someone being vulnerable. It's not necessarily vulnerability. Sometimes it's just disclosing information. And I do talk about how this can be a red flag in a video I call They Will Abandon You. And I'll go ahead and link that video in the description below. All right, let's fast forward a couple of years. I'm back out on the dating scene and I meet a gentleman for a drink. I did notice that the conversation became heavily skewed towards his recent divorce after 8 years of marriage with a woman who left him 3 months earlier. I definitely picked up on this, but I remained quiet and I kept the information in my back pocket because at this point, I was beginning to see more success in my dating life when I leaned back, when I focused on having fun in the present moment and just listening to people and collecting information. He asked me out on a second date to a nice restaurant, and he was pretty cool and respectful, so what the heck, why not? Let's go. When we got there, he greeted the hostess like he knew her and Surprise, surprise, she turned out to be his ex-wife's best friend. How completely random and not at all planned. I was no longer so naive that I believed him when he said he just hadn't realized that his ex-wife's friend would be working that night. And if he was really concerned about that, there was 200 other restaurants in the area that he could have taken us to. He did not take me to that beautiful restaurant to impress me. He was there to get a jab in at his ex-wife. He knew that her friend would let her know that he showed up with another woman, and I'm sure he gleaned from our first meeting that I would show up looking my very best. Well, welcome to the other half, where we know attraction is not just about looks. We also have to take care of the inner half. Because if we don't take the time in between failed relationships to gain clarity on what happened, we can unintentionally continue to become the ghosts of our lover's past. Now, was this woman his phantom ex? I don't know. I just think he was married for 8 years. He didn't want the divorce, and 3 months after it was finalized is way too soon for him to be back out on the dating scene. Anyone would still be going through painful emotions. That's just my gut opinion of the matter. I don't know him very well. We only had 2 dates because after that, I called it. That was a hard lesson I only cared to learn once. We all learn different lessons along the way. We learn red flags and things that trigger us. And like I said, this was my own personal experience. I had learned not to go any farther with anyone who was rubbing their ex in my face, or their ex, idealizing them or demonizing them, became the main topic of conversation within our first couple of meetings. I've learned that I cannot be someone's priority if someone else is taking up that space in their lives. And if you want a sad glimpse of what happens to avoidant people and their fantasy phantom exes, well, let me pedal back and tell you what happened to my DAX now that it's been 30 years since Natalie the narcissist abandoned him for another man. Yeah, you remember Natalie, the woman who scarred him so badly? Well, about a month ago, I was at a social gathering with some mutual friends, and I overheard someone mention that he was out of town that weekend because he was off helping Natalie fix something in the attic of her house. She will always remain one of his many phantom excuses that he uses to push away people who love him in his life. My DAX is still out there. He's still single and he's in his 50s. He will always use Natalie as a phantom excuse to push away romantic prospects, and yet he continues to idealize her and cater to her. I believe they established a very early toxic dynamic where her complete self-absorption turns him highly anxious, and even to this day, he's still trying to prove his worth to her. He's still trying to prove that he's useful to her. Catering to your own narcissistic, unfaithful, breadcrumbing, half-loving, avoidant ex for 30 years? This is no way to live. This is sad. The reality is, you might feel like your avoidant ex gets to ride off into the sunset, but unhealed avoidants do not get to live out a perfect fantasy. And if I had personally never, ever gotten involved with my avoidant DAX, and he had called me on an encouragement phone call, I would have told him that he has no business fixing up the home of a woman who discarded him for another man 30 years ago, because this is not what self-respect looks like. But as a lot of us have learned, our DAs don't care about our feelings or thoughts on any subject. And I've also learned that you can't force someone to heal or be happy. It doesn't matter how much you care about them or how much you want the best for them. My DA is no longer a part of my life. He's a ghost of my past. So I guess all I can really say to him is, have fun being a ghost. in some cheating woman's attic. When people, anyone, is discarded with reckless abandon, it can alter their life forever. It can trigger them to begin to avoid love. I know today you might be feeling pretty low, but please understand, your avoidant did not reject you. They are running away from past pain that didn't involve you. You didn't cause it, and no, it's not fair, and no, it doesn't make their behavior okay. You might be tempted to reach out to your avoidant ex because after researching avoidant attachment, you learn that just because they left you, it doesn't always mean it was because they weren't interested in you. But I have learned that I am no longer interested in someone who is so afraid of love and affection that they can't send one text message wanting to talk about the relationship. Give avoidance what they want and leave them alone with their memories. Go out and build a life, a real life for yourself. No more fantasies, phantoms, and ghosts. Think real people, tangible people, people who talk back to you. Someone who is integrated in a very real way, slowly but consistently into your real daily life. And the next time you go to a restaurant with a real date, you can proudly tell the hostess that no, I will not be dining alone tonight. In fact, it's going to be a party of you. If this video helped you, so will this one. My name is Maria Adriana. You did not have to live my life, but I sure as heck hope you can learn something from it. As always, thank you for visiting The Other Half.